Dog led his owner to a hidden secret. What they found is unbelievable. It was just another ordinary evening in the city. The golden sunset cast long shadows on the streets, and the faint hum of life filled the air. Cars honking, people chatting, and distant sirens echoing through the buildings. Dr. Ava Carter, a young veterinarian, wiped her hands on a towel as she stepped out of her small clinic. It had been a long day, filled with checkups, vaccinations, and an emergency surgery on a stray cat. She exhaled deeply, finally ready to go home and enjoy a warm meal. But then she saw him. A golden retriever stood in the middle of the busy intersection, just a block away. His thick fur was matted and dusty, but his posture was firm. His eyes, deep brown and filled with something Ava couldn't quite understand, were locked on something beyond the street. Horns blared as cars swerved around him. A driver rolled down his window and shouted, "Move, dog!" Another car slammed its brakes, barely missing him. Yet the dog did not flinch. Ava's heart pounded. Without thinking, she rushed forward, dodging traffic as she made her way toward the dog. "Hey, buddy," she called gently, holding out her hand. "Come on, let's get you out of here." The dog flicked an ear but didn't move. His gaze stayed locked ahead as if he was waiting for something, or someone. More people had started to gather on the sidewalk, whispering among themselves. "Is that a stray? I've seen him before. He's been wandering for days. He won't move no matter what we do." Ava carefully stepped closer, her pulse quickening. The dog's body was tense, his tail still. Yet there was no aggression in his eyes, only determination. Just as she was about to reach him, a woman's voice cut through the crowd. "Max?" Ava turned to see a middle-aged woman pushing through the bystanders. Her eyes were wide with shock, and her hands trembled as she hurried toward them. "Max! Oh my God, Max!" The dog's ears perked up. His head finally turned away from whatever had held his attention, and in the next second, he bolted toward the woman. The woman collapsed to her knees, wrapping her arms around the dog as tears streamed down her face. "Where have you been?" she sobbed, pressing her face into Max's fur. "I thought I lost you forever." Ava took a hesitant step forward. "Do you know him?" The woman wiped her eyes and looked up. "Yes, he was my husband's dog." Her voice broke as she added, "My husband, Daniel, was a firefighter. He passed away in a fire 3 months ago." Ava felt a sharp pang in her chest. "I'm so sorry," she whispered. The woman, Helen, stroked Max's back, her fingers trembling. After Daniel died, Max changed. He wouldn't eat properly, wouldn't play, and then one day he just disappeared. I searched everywhere, but he was gone. Max whined softly, pressing closer to Helen as if trying to comfort her. Ava crouched beside them, her mind racing. Then why was he standing there in the middle of traffic? Helen shook her head. "I don't know, but lately he's been acting strange. Even before he ran away, he would sit by the door at odd hours, as if waiting for something. And then I heard from a neighbor that they saw him near the old fire station where Daniel used to work." Ava looked down at Max, who stared back at her with those deep, knowing eyes. "What are you trying to tell us, buddy?" she murmured. Max let out a low whine and suddenly turned his head, looking back in the direction of the intersection. Helen's breath hitched. It's like he's searching for something. Ava's heart pounded harder. She had always believed that animals could sense things that humans couldn't. And looking at Max now, she knew he was trying to lead them to something, or someone. She made a decision right then and there. "Helen, I think we should follow him." Helen wiped her eyes, nodding. "Okay, if Max is trying to show us something, we need to listen." Ava stood up, patting Max's head gently. "All right, buddy, lead the way." Max took one last glance at the street before turning toward the narrow alleys of the city. And with that, they began their journey, following a dog who refused to give up on the past. A dog whose silent plea was about to reveal a truth they never expected.
The city streets grew quieter as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a golden glow over the buildings. Ava tightened her coat, stealing a glance at Max, who walked ahead with quiet determination. His paws padded softly against the pavement, his ears twitching as he moved with purpose. Helen, still shaken from their encounter at the intersection, walked beside Ava, She held on to Max's leash, though it was clear the dog wasn't trying to run. He wasn't lost. He knew exactly where he was going. "Where do you think he's leading us?" Helen asked, her voice laced with both fear and curiosity. Ava shook her head. "I don't know, but I have a feeling Max does." Max suddenly stopped in front of an alleyway near the old fire station. The building had been abandoned since the accident that took Daniel's life. The city planned to demolish it, but for now it stood in eerie silence, its charred walls still bearing the scars of that terrible night. Helen hesitated. He used to bring Max here all the time, said it was his second home. Max let out a soft whine before stepping forward, sniffing the ground as if searching for something. His nose brushed against a pile of debris near the entrance, and then he stopped. Ava knelt beside him. "What is it, boy?" Gingerly, she pushed aside the rubble and uncovered a half-burned firefighter's tag. The name was barely visible, but when Helen saw it, she let out a sharp gasp. "That's..." Her voice broke. "That's Daniel's." Ava handed it to her gently. "It looks like it was buried here, hidden under everything." Helen's fingers trembled as she clutched the tag. Tears welled up in her eyes, but there was something else there too, a deep sense of confusion. "Why would this be here?" she whispered. "Daniel's body was found inside. How did his tag end up outside?" Ava's heart pounded. The official report said Daniel had died trying to contain the fire, but something about this didn't sit right. She looked at Max, who was watching them intently, tail still and eyes locked onto Helen, as if he was waiting for her to understand. Helen wiped her tears. "Come on. I think Max wants to show us more." They continued their walk, Max leading the way through streets Ava had never bothered to explore before. He took careful steps, as if retracing a path he had walked many times before. Then suddenly, he stopped again. They had arrived at an abandoned parking lot at the edge of town. The lot was empty except for a few rusted cars and a broken street lamp flickering dimly. Max's posture changed. His tail stood straight, his ears perked, and his head tilted slightly, as if listening for something unseen. Ava took a cautious step forward. "Why here?" Helen looked around, confusion etched onto her face. Daniel used to mention this place. He said it gave him a bad feeling. Max walked toward one of the rusted cars, sniffing the ground. Ava followed, kneeling beside him. She brushed her fingers against the dirt and suddenly felt something strange. The ground was warm. She placed her hand flat against the pavement. The air was cool, but the ground shouldn't be warm. Her chest tightened. "Helen, I think something's burning underground." Helen's eyes widened. "What do you mean?" Ava looked around, spotting a thin trail of smoke rising from a crack in the pavement. She quickly pulled out her phone and switched on the flashlight. There, barely visible, were small charred markings on the concrete, forming a pattern. Helen knelt beside her. "These look like symbols," Ava nodded. "And look at this." She reached into a crevice and pulled out a small, burned notebook. Helen gasped. "That looks like Daniel's handwriting." Ava carefully flipped through the pages, her breath catching as she read the notes scrawled inside. "Something isn't right. The fires aren't random. Someone is setting them deliberately." She turned another page. "They want people to think these are accidents, but they're not." The last page was barely readable, the ink smudged from heat and ash, but one word stood out: warehouse. Helen gripped Ava's arm. "What does this mean?" Ava swallowed hard. "I think Daniel was onto something before he died. I think he was investigating these fires and he found out the truth." Helen's face paled. "Then why didn't he tell me?" Ava hesitated. "Maybe he was trying to protect you." A long silence stretched between them. Then Max barked, once sharply. Ava turned. The golden retriever had his nose pressed against the fence surrounding the lot, tail stiff and unmoving. Beyond the fence in the distance stood an old warehouse. Helen's breath hitched. "That's where Daniel..." She stopped herself, shaking her head. "No, I can't go there." Ava took her hand gently. "I know this is hard, but I think Max is telling us that's where we'll find the truth." Helen looked down at the dog, at the way he gazed up at her with such fierce loyalty. He wasn't just trying to solve a mystery, he was trying to bring her closure. Slowly, she nodded. "Okay." Ava squeezed her hand, then turned back to the warehouse. Whatever had happened to Daniel, the answers were waiting for them inside. And Max, his eyes filled with an emotion too deep to name, was determined to lead them all the way there. Ava's breath came in slow, measured exhales as she and Helen stood before the abandoned warehouse. The old structure loomed over them, its rusted exterior bathed in the dim glow of a nearby street lamp. The scent of charred wood and oil lingered in the air, an eerie reminder of the fire that had taken Daniel's life. Max stood at the entrance, his golden fur illuminated by the flickering light. He was still, watching the warehouse with the same intensity that had led them here. Helen hesitated, her hands trembling. "I don't know if I can do this," she whispered. Ava placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "I know it's hard, but we need to see this through. Max brought us here for a reason." Max let out a soft whimper before nudging Helen's leg. His warm brown eyes pleaded with her to trust him. Helen swallowed hard and nodded. "Okay." Ava pushed against the metal door, and it groaned in protest before slowly swinging open. The darkness inside swallowed them whole. The air inside the warehouse was thick with dust and the faint smell of something chemical. Ava flicked on her flashlight, illuminating scattered debris, charred wooden beams, rusted barrels, and shattered glass. Max padded forward carefully, his nose low to the ground as he sniffed the air. His tail was stiff, his posture tense. He knew something was wrong. Helen's voice was barely above a whisper. "This place, it feels like a graveyard." Ava nodded. "This is where Daniel was found, but I don't think it's where he died." Helen turned to her sharply. "What do you mean?" Ava knelt near a section of the floor where the wood had been recently disturbed. She brushed away the dust and noticed faint footprints. "Someone's been here," she murmured. Max let out a low growl. Helen hugged herself. "I don't understand. The fire was ruled an accident. Daniel was trying to contain it when the roof collapsed." Ava bit her lip. "That's what the report said. But if that's true, then why was his tag buried outside?" Helen sucked in a breath. "Are you saying someone covered up what really happened?" Ava hesitated before answering. "I think Daniel found something he wasn't supposed to, and I think someone made sure he never got the chance to tell anyone." Max suddenly barked, a sharp, urgent sound that echoed through the warehouse. Ava and Helen turned to see the dog standing near a pile of metal drums. He scratched at the floor, whining, his ears pinned back. Ava rushed over and crouched beside him. "What is it, Max?" She brushed away the dirt and froze. Underneath the dust lay a burned firefighter's jacket. Helen gasped, covering her mouth. "Oh my God." Ava lifted the fabric carefully, her hands shaking. The jacket was torn and singed, but when she turned it over, her stomach twisted into knots. On the inside, written in black ink, was a Daniel Carter. Helen collapsed to her knees, sobbing. "This can't be real. Why is his jacket here? It should have been with his body." Ava gently placed a hand on Helen's back, trying to steady her own emotions. "I don't think Daniel died in the fire. I think he was left here before it even started." Helen looked up, her face streaked with tears. "You think someone murdered him?" Ava's jaw clenched. "I think someone wanted to make it look like an accident." Max let out another bark, circling a metal storage unit near the back of the warehouse. He scratched at the door, his whines growing louder. Ava turned the handle, but it wouldn't budge. It was locked. Helen wiped her eyes and looked around frantically. "There has to be something we can use." Ava spotted a crowbar leaning against a crate. She grabbed it and wedged it into the lock, pushing with all her strength. The lock snapped. The storage unit door swung open, revealing boxes stacked high, each marked with a familiar logo. Helen's breath hitched. That's the company Daniel was investigating. Ava reached for one of the boxes and pried it open. Inside were canisters of accelerant, the same type used in the fires around the city. Helen backed away. "Oh my God, they've been setting these fires on purpose." Ava's pulse pounded. Daniel must have found out. He was getting too close to the truth, so they silenced him. Max let out a deep growl. A shadow moved near the entrance. Ava spun around just as a tall figure stepped forward. A man in his late 40s, his face partially hidden by the dim light. His presence sent a cold chill down Ava's spine. Helen gasped. "Ethan?" Ava's stomach dropped. Ethan Matthews. Daniel's closest friend. His partner at the fire department. His voice was eerily calm. "I knew you'd come here eventually." Helen shook her head in disbelief. "You were Daniel's best friend. How could you?" Ethan stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "You don't understand. I didn't want to do it." Ava's hands curled into fists. "Then why did you?" Ethan sighed heavily, rubbing his temples. "I tried to stop him. I told him to leave it alone, but Daniel was stubborn. He wouldn't drop it. And when he found proof of what was happening, the people behind this, they gave me a choice." Helen's voice trembled. "A choice?" Ethan's eyes darkened. "Either I convinced Daniel to stay quiet, or they would make him disappear." Ava's breath hitched. "So you helped them?" Ethan looked away. "I never meant for it to go that far. I thought if I just scared him, he'd back off." Helen's eyes filled with horror. "You were supposed to protect him." Ethan swallowed hard. "I did what I had to do." Ava took a step closer. "And now, what are you going to do now that we know the truth?" Ethan exhaled slowly, reaching into his pocket. Max let out a vicious snarl. Ava's pulse skyrocketed as Ethan pulled out a lighter. "You weren't supposed to find this place," he said. He flicked the lighter, the small flame casting eerie shadows. Max lunged. Before Ethan could react, Max slammed into him, knocking the lighter from his hands. Ava and Helen scrambled backward as Ethan hit the ground, stunned. Max stood over him, teeth bared, his deep growl rumbling through the warehouse. Ava wasted no time. She grabbed the lighter and stomped out the flame before turning to Helen. "Call the police." Helen, tears in her eyes, fumbled for her phone and dialed. Max didn't move from his spot, his body firm, his gaze locked onto Ethan as if daring him to try anything. Minutes later, the distant wail of sirens echoed through the night. Ava finally let out a breath. They had found the truth. Daniel hadn't died in an accident. He had been betrayed. And thanks to Max, justice was finally coming. The flashing red and blue lights bathed the warehouse walls as police officers swarmed the area. Helen stood frozen, her arms wrapped around herself, while Ava knelt beside Max, running her fingers gently through his thick golden fur. The dog had saved them all. Ethan was on the ground, his face pale as two officers hauled him to his feet. His hands were cuffed behind his back, and for the first time, the man who had once been Daniel's closest friend looked defeated. Helen clenched her fists, taking a slow step forward. "You betrayed him." Ethan's lips parted, but no words came out. Maybe there was nothing left to say. Detective Mason, a tall, stern-looking officer, approached them. "We've been investigating these fires for months, but we never had enough evidence to prove anything. What you found here changes everything." He turned to Helen. "I'm sorry about your husband, but because of you and this dog, we can finally bring those responsible to justice." Helen swallowed, her throat tight. "I just want the truth to come out." Mason nodded, then turned to Ava. "You should get checked out at the hospital. You've both been through a lot." Ava exhaled, suddenly realizing how exhausted she was. "We'll be okay. Thanks, Detective." Max gave a soft, pressing against Helen's leg. She looked down at him and managed a small, shaky smile. "He never gave up on Daniel," she whispered, "and now neither would the world." The next morning, the news exploded. Firefighter's death was no accident. Corrupt arson ring exposed. Loyal dog uncovers mystery behind hero's betrayal. Helen sat at her kitchen table, flipping through the headlines on her phone. Every article, every news channel, every online blog. They all told Daniel's story. Ethan had been part of a scheme run by a powerful real estate group that had been deliberately setting fires to devalue land and buy it for cheap. When Daniel got too close to uncovering the operation, he was silenced. Except he hadn't been, because Max had refused to let his memory fade. Helen reached down, gently running a hand over the dog's head. "You saved him, didn't you?" she murmured. Max looked up at her with those deep, understanding eyes, the same eyes that had never stopped searching for the truth. Ava, sitting across from her with a warm cup of tea, smiled. "He's more than just a pet, he's a hero." Helen swallowed hard. I think he knew Daniel was in danger before we did." She wiped a tear away. "I should have listened. Maybe I could have." Ava reached across the table, squeezing Helen's hand. "Daniel wouldn't want you to blame yourself. He would want you to live." Helen let out a slow, shaky breath. "I just miss him so much." Max whined softly and nudged his head into Helen's lap. She ran her fingers through his fur, feeling warmth spread through her chest. For the first time in months, the grief didn't feel so unbearable. A week later, the city of Springfield held a ceremony in Daniel's honor. The town square was filled with people: firefighters, neighbors, reporters, and families who had been affected by the mysterious fires. They had all come to pay tribute to the man who had fought for justice, even when it cost him his life. Helen stood in the front row, holding Daniel's framed photograph. Next to her, Max sat proudly, his golden coat brushed and gleaming in the sunlight. The mayor stepped up to the podium. Today, we honor a man who gave everything to protect this city. Daniel Carter saw the truth when no one else did. He fought for justice, and because of him, those responsible will be held accountable. Applause echoed through the square. The mayor continued, "But Daniel didn't fight alone. He had a partner who never stopped believing in him, a partner who led us to the truth when no one else could." He turned to Max, smiling warmly. "Max, you're a hero." The crowd erupted in cheers. A uniformed firefighter stepped forward, placing a medal of bravery around Max's neck. The golden retriever wagged his tail, his tongue lolling out in a happy pant. Helen knelt beside him, wrapping her arms around his neck. "Daniel would be so proud of you," she whispered. Max licked her cheek, his eyes filled with the same unwavering love he had always shown Daniel. That night, as the streets grew quiet, Helen sat on her porch with Ava, watching as Max lay at their feet, content. "You know," Ava said softly, "you don't have to go through this alone." Helen nodded. I think Max and I are going to be okay." Ava smiled. "I think Daniel would want that." Helen reached down, scratching behind Max's ears. "You stayed by his side until the very end, didn't you?" Max let out a sob, closing his eyes as if remembering. Helen inhaled deeply, feeling a sense of peace she hadn't felt in months. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was saying goodbye to Daniel. She was carrying him forward. And thanks to Max, the world would always remember his story. The story of a hero.